Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen. But she wrote anyway, because he was sitting 3 feet behind her, because she hadn't slept a full night in 2 years, because every exit in that diner had his eyes on it. And this napkin, this one grease-stained napkin, was the only thing left. She folded it once, tucked it under the coffee cup, slid it across the counter, and for one single second, her eyes met the stranger's. Just 1 second. Then she turned back to the counter, picked up the next order, and kept moving like nothing had happened. Like her whole life wasn't sitting under that cup. 10 minutes later, 50 motorcycles surrounded the van outside. What did she write? This is Heart Tales. Subscribe and stay with me. 1 if you're new. 2 if you've been here a while. 3 if you never miss. Let's go back to that morning. Maya had been at Carver's diner for 4 months. She knew every exit, every blind spot, every corner of the lot she could see from the counter, and the one she couldn't. That was the first thing she learned in any new place. Not the menu, not the regulars. The exits. That morning, before she left for her shift, she had looked at her phone. A photo she kept in a folder she never deleted. Lily, age 6, gap-toothed grin, holding up a drawing of what was supposed to be a horse, but looked almost exactly like a dog. Maya had laughed the first time she saw it. Actually laughed. The kind that comes before you remember what day it is. She looked at it most mornings now, just for a second. Just to remember what she was holding all of this together for. Then she put the phone away and drove to work. Derek came in at 7:14. He always came in at 7:14. He took the stool at the far end of the counter, third from the window, same as always, set his phone face up on the laminate, and wrapped both hands around the coffee mug she poured without being asked. 1 sugar, too much cream, a little hotter than most people liked it. She remembered these things the way you remember things you were trained to remember. Not because you chose to, because forgetting carried consequences. He didn't say much that morning. He didn't need to. That was the part that was hardest to explain to anyone who hadn't lived it. The way a person could sit completely still, hands around a coffee mug, not raising his voice, not making a scene, and still fill an entire room with something that felt like a hand around your throat. Derek had a gift for that. He watched her work. Table 2, table 5, back to the counter. Every time she turned, his eyes were already there. Not angry, not threatening, just present, constant. The way a shadow is constant on a sunny day. You don't have to look at it to know it's there. At 8:40, a trucker at table 4 knocked his coffee over. It happened fast. Elbow caught the edge of the mug. The whole thing went sideways, brown liquid spreading fast across the laminate. The trucker lurched back, swearing under his breath, grabbing napkins. Maya was there in 6 steps, towel already in hand. I'm so sorry about that, the trucker said. Don't worry about it, she said. Happens all the time. She smiled at him. A real one, or close enough. She cleaned the table without looking up, but in the reflection of the window beside table 4, she could see Derek's stool. Could see him watching the interaction with the particular stillness of a man cataloging information. The way she had smiled, the way she had leaned in, the way her hand had brushed the trucker's arm. Accidentally, completely accidentally. Just the logistics of cleaning a table. And how Derek's jaw had shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. She saw all of that in 3 inches of window glass. She straightened up, walked back to the counter. did not look at Derek. Normal. Keep it normal. At 9:15 he called her name. Not loud. He never did anything loud in public. Just Maya. Quiet. Conversational. The tone of a man asking his girlfriend to pass the salt. She walked over. "You look tired," he said. She said nothing. "You sleeping okay?" "I'm fine," she said. He studied her face the way he always did. Slow, methodical, looking for the thing she was trying not to show him. He had always been good at finding it. Years of practice, years of learning exactly where her edges were and how hard he could press before she broke. "You should eat something," he said. "You're getting thin." She picked up the coffee pot, refilled his mug without being asked. "I'm fine," she said again. He let it go. That was the other thing nobody tells you. The way they let things go. Sometimes. The way you never know which version you're going to get. The unpredictability was its own kind of control. You spent so much energy bracing for the bad moments that the ordinary ones felt like traps. Like the calm before something you couldn't yet see coming. She had been braced for 2 years. She was so tired of being braced. By 10:30, the breakfast rush had thinned. Sandra was rolling silverware at the far end of the counter. Hector had turned the radio up in the kitchen. Something country, low and scratchy through the wall. Derek was still there. He ordered a second coffee. Then a piece of pie he didn't eat. He was in no hurry. He had nowhere else to be. Or rather, he had decided that here was where he needed to be, which for Derek amounted to the same thing. Maya refilled the corner booth, cleared table 3, wiped down the specials board, and rewrote the soup of the day even though it hadn't changed. She moved the way she always moved when he was watching. Efficient, contained, taking up as little space as possible. Not rushing. Rushing looked like fear. Fear gave him something. She had learned to give him nothing, but inside was a different calculation entirely. $41 in her apron. Enough for gas, maybe, if she left tonight. Except she had left 3 times before, and he had found her 3 times before. And the last time she had come back with 2 cracked ribs, and a story about a car door that nobody believed, and nobody pushed back on hard enough to matter. There was no leaving tonight. There was no leaving at all unless something changed. And nothing was going to change. She was wiping the counter for the 3rd time, not because it needed it, just because her hands needed something to do. When she heard it. Outside. From the lot. Engines. Not one. A group of them. Low, rolling in together off the highway. The particular layered sound of multiple bikes moving as one. She had heard that sound before on the interstate, passing through. It had never meant anything to her. She looked up. Through the window she could see them pulling in. 8, maybe 9 bikes, road-worn, unhurried. Men swinging off their rides with the ease of people who had done it 10,000 times. She almost looked away. Then she saw the patch. The man at the front, older, silver at his temples, broad through the shoulders. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from having nothing to say, but from having learned when to say it. Wore a road captain insignia on his vest. Worn leather. Miles on it. His eyes moved across the lot the way experienced eyes always moved. Not paranoid, just aware. Taking in the space, noting what was there. For one moment, just one, those eyes passed across the diner window. Maya didn't move, didn't breathe. Something shifted in her chest. Not a plan. Not even a thought yet. Something that existed before thoughts do. A flicker of something she had almost forgotten the shape of. She pressed it down immediately. She had learned not to hope. Hope made you careless. Hope made you miss the thing coming at you from the side you weren't watching. But her hand, her right hand, the one not holding the kofot, had already moved to her apron pocket, where the order pad was, where the pen was. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. She looked back at Derek. He was looking at his phone. Hadn't noticed the bikes. Hadn't noticed her looking. 11 seconds. That was how long he had looked at his phone without looking up. She had counted. She was always counting. The group of bikers pushed through the front door. Bell above the frame ringing once, bright and ordinary, and settled into the big corner booth and the 2 tables beside it. Loud and easy, the way groups of men are loud and easy when they've been on the road for hours and just want coffee and something hot. Sandra moved to take them. "I'll get it," Maya said. Sandra looked at her. Maya was already reaching for the coffee pot. She walked toward the corner booth, toward the man with the road captain patch. Her hand was in her apron pocket now, fingers touching the edge of the order pad, the pen clipped to the top of it. Her heart was hitting her ribs so hard she was sure everyone in the diner could hear it. Nobody looked up. Derek was still on his phone. She had maybe 30 seconds, maybe less. She had served 1,000 tables. She knew how to walk toward a customer without looking like she was walking toward a customer. Knew how to smile without it reaching her eyes. Knew how to stand at the edge of a booth and take an order and be completely, utterly unremarkable. She used all of that now. "Morning," she said. "Coffee to start?" The men in the booth were loud in the comfortable way of people who had been together long enough that they didn't need to perform for each other. Someone was arguing about a gas station outside Memphis. Someone else was complaining about his back. A younger one, couldn't have been more than 25, jaw still soft at the edges, was showing something on his phone to the man beside him. Normal, ordinary, a group of bikers stopping for breakfast. Maya poured coffee without being asked, moved around the table, kept her face easy. The man with the road captain patch was at the far end of the booth. Up close, he was older than she'd thought from across the diner. Late 50s, maybe. Hands that had seen decades of road and weather. A face that had learned somewhere along the way to give very little away. He hadn't looked at her yet. She poured his coffee last. Her hand was steady. She had made it steady through pure will, the same way she had made herself walk normally across the diner floor, the same way she had made her voice come out even when she said morning. And she held it steady now as the coffee filled his cup. He looked up. His eyes were the color of slate after rain, quiet, unhurried, and in the single second that their eyes met, she felt it, the thing she had been pressing down since the parking lot, the flicker she hadn't let herself name. She looked away first. "I'll give you all a minute with the menus," she said. She walked back to the counter. Derek was still on his phone. 22 seconds since she had last checked. She knew because she had counted every one of them. She set the coffee pot down, reached into her apron pocket, pulled out the order pad, slowly, the way you pull something out when you don't want it to look like anything, and held it against the counter edge. Think. She had thought about moments like this before. Alone in whatever apartment she was living in at the time, door locked, lights low, the particular kind of thinking you do at 2 in the morning, sleep won't come, and your brain runs the same loops over and over. What would you do if? What would you say if? How would you get out if? She had never had an answer that worked, but she had never had a road captain sitting 10 feet away before either. Her father had known men like that. She remembered. She was maybe 9, 10 years old, sitting in the back of his truck while he talked to a man outside a gas station. Leather vest, patches, the particular way they shook hands that wasn't quite a handshake. She had asked her father about it later. "Those are men who keep their word," he had said. That's rarer than it sounds. She hadn't understood it then. She understood it now. She picked up the pen. Her hand started shaking immediately. The same hand that had been steady 30 seconds ago, that she had forced into steadiness through sheer concentration. And now it shook the way hands shake when the body finally understands what the mind has decided to do. She pressed the pen against the order pad. Stopped. Derek shifted on his stool. She didn't look. She tracked him the way you track something dangerous. Not with your eyes, but with the whole surface of your skin. The way every hair on your arms stood up slightly whenever he moved. He was reaching for his coffee mug, not looking at her. She looked down at the order pad. She had to make it look like an order. Had to make it look like she was writing down what someone asked for. Eggs, toast, side of bacon. Something unremarkable. Something that, if he looked up right now and saw her pen moving, would look exactly like her doing her job. She started writing. Not an order. Table 4. He has a gun. I can't call 911. Please help me. Her handwriting was worse than she'd ever seen it. The letters jagged, uneven, nothing like her normal script. Her hand was shaking too hard for anything else. She pressed the pen down harder. Steadied it against the pad. Please. She underlined it twice. Then she drew a small arrow, pointing left, toward Derek's stool, and pressed so hard the pen nearly went through the paper. She looked up. Derek was looking at her. Her whole body went cold. He wasn't suspicious. She could tell. She had learned to read his face the way you learn to read weather. The way certain people who have lived through enough storms develop a sense for what's coming. And this was not suspicion. This was just his baseline, the constant, ambient monitoring that never fully turned off. He looked back at his phone. She exhaled through her nose. Slow, quiet, so small nobody saw it. She tore the page from the order pad, folded it once, twice, small enough to fit under the base of a coffee cup with nothing showing. Then she picked up the coffee pot, the same coffee pot, the same motion, the same unremarkable task she had performed 300 times at this diner, and walked back to the corner booth. "Refill? Refill?" she said. The men barely looked up. Someone was still talking about Memphis. The young one had put his phone away and was reading the menu with the focused intensity of a man who had skipped breakfast and was now regretting it deeply. She moved around the table, poured coffee. The road captain held his mug out without looking up. He was reading something on the table in front of him. A folded map worn at the creases. The kind people stopped using when GPS became reliable, and some people never stopped using anyway. She poured. Her hand was shaking again. She watched the coffee fill his cup, and she thought, with the strange, dissociated clarity that comes in moments of extreme fear, that if she spilled it, if her hand gave out right now and the coffee went everywhere, it would be over. Derek would look up. The moment would collapse, and she would go home tonight, and there would be consequences for whatever he had decided she had done. The coffee filled the cup without spilling. She set the pot down on the edge of the table, and in the same motion, the same single, continuous motion, nothing extra, nothing that looked like anything, she slid the folded napkin under the base of his cup. Her fingers were on the table for less than 2 seconds. Then she picked the pot back up. "You all ready to order?" she said. "Someone said eggs. Someone said pancakes." The young one wanted to know if the biscuits were made from scratch, and Maya said yes, even though she honestly wasn't sure, and wrote it down anyway because her hand needed something to do. She wrote the order, did not look at the road captain, did not look at Derek, walked back to the counter, clipped the order to the wheel, called it back to Hector. Then she stood at the counter with her back to the room and her hands flat on the laminate surface and counted. 1, 2, 3. She counted the way she always counted. Not because counting helped, but because it was something to do with her mind, while the rest of her waited for the world to either hold together or come apart. At 7, she heard the ceramic click of a coffee cup being set down. At 11, she heard the rustle of something small being unfolded. At 15, nothing. Silence. The normal noise of the diner filling in around it. Silverware, conversation, Hector calling an order up. But underneath all of that, in the specific frequency she was listening on, silence. At 23, she allowed herself to turn around. The road captain was looking at the map. The coffee cup was back in his hand. There was nothing on the table. She couldn't tell. She couldn't tell if he had read it and pocketed it, or read it and crumpled it, or never unfolded it at all. His face gave her nothing. The same stillness, the same unhurried quality. The same expression he had been wearing when she walked in. She looked at Derek. He was typing something on his phone, both thumbs, not looking up. She looked back at the road captain. He raised his coffee cup slightly, not toward her, not a gesture, just the ordinary motion of a man drinking his coffee, and over the rim of it, for one single fraction of a second, his eyes moved to hers. And held. She couldn't breathe. His expression didn't change, not visibly, not in any way that anyone else in the diner would have noticed or could have described later. But something moved behind his eyes. Something that recognized her. Not her face, not her name. Something older than that. Something that recognized the specific shape of what she was carrying. The weight of it, the way it had worn itself into the set of her shoulders, and the careful economy of every move she made. He had seen it before. She knew that in the same wordless way, she knew everything that mattered. Not from evidence, not from reasoning, just from the particular certainty that lived in the body before the mind catches up. He had seen it before. And he was not going to look away. He set his cup down, reached into the inside pocket of his vest, pulled out a phone, began typing something. Unhurried, no change in expression, just a man sending a message. And Maya made herself look away before she stood there, staring long enough for Derek to notice. She picked up the coffee pot, walked to table 2, refilled a mug she had already refilled 20 minutes ago. Her whole body was shaking now. Not just her hands, not just her voice, but everything. A fine tremor that ran from her knees up through her chest, and that she was keeping invisible through sheer force of the same will that had kept her invisible for 2 years. She didn't know what he was going to do. She didn't know if he was going to do anything. She had handed a folded piece of paper to a stranger and walked away. And now there was nothing left to do but wait. And waiting, she had learned, was its own kind of suffering. But then her apron pocket buzzed once. She didn't reach for it immediately. Counted to 5, walked back to the counter, set the coffee pot down. Then she slipped her hand into her pocket. Unknown number. A text. 4 lines. I read it. Stay at your station. Do not change anything. Do not look at the lot. We're already moving. Maya read it twice. She put the phone back in her pocket. She picked up the coffee pot. She did not look at the lot. But something in her chest, that thing she had pressed down since the parking lot, the flicker she hadn't let herself name, rose up quietly and refused, this time, to go back down. Rex Calloway had been a road captain for 19 years. In that time, he had handled situations that didn't have names, had made decisions in seconds that other men spent weeks second-guessing, had learned the hard way, the only way that lesson ever really sticks, that the difference between a moment going right and a moment going wrong was usually not strength or numbers or any of the things people assumed it was. It was timing. It was reading the room correctly before the room knew it needed to be read. He had read this room in under 30 seconds. The waitress, Maya, her name tag said, small block letters. The tag slightly crooked the way name tags get when you've been wearing them for months. Moved through the diner with the particular efficiency of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible. Not shy, not quiet by nature. Something else. Something that came from the outside in rather than the inside out. He had seen that walk before. He had seen it on his sister. 20 years ago, in a kitchen in Knoxville, before things got bad enough that the family finally stopped pretending they weren't bad. He recognized it the way you recognize a sound you heard once in childhood. Not consciously, not immediately, but somewhere underneath conscious thought, in the part of the brain that never stops cataloging danger. When the napkin appeared under his cup, he didn't react. That was the first discipline. No reaction. Nothing that changed the quality of the air around him. Nothing that made the man at the counter look up from his phone. He had learned that stillness was its own kind of power, that the ability to receive information without visibly receiving it was worth more in moments like this than almost anything else. He read the napkin once, folded it, put it in his vest pocket, picked up his coffee, took out his phone. The text he sent was 4 words, eyes on the counter. Across the booth, Danny, 26 years old, sharp eyes behind the easy grin, the kind of young man who looked like he was always half paying attention, and was in fact paying attention to everything, shifted almost imperceptibly in his seat. His eyes moved to the counter, moved to the man on the stool, moved back to his menu. He didn't nod, didn't speak, just reached under the table and tapped twice on the knee of the man sitting beside him. Carver, 43, built like a barn door, currently pretending to read the specials. And Carver's eyes moved to the counter without his head moving at all. That was the second discipline. Communication without communication. Years of riding together, of situations that required silence, had built a language between them that had no words in it. A tap, a look, the angle of a shoulder, a coffee cup set down slightly harder than necessary. Enough, Rex typed a second message. This one went to a number saved under a single initial. Diner on Route 12. Blue pickup in the lot. Tennessee plates. Need a quiet surround. How many you got close? The response came in 40 seconds. 7. 10 minutes out. Rex typed back. Come in from the east. Stagger the approach. Nobody parks in the lot. He put his phone away, picked up his fork. The eggs in front of him were getting cold. He ate them anyway, methodically, without rush, because a man who stops eating in the middle of breakfast is a man whose behavior's changed, and changed behavior was information. And information was the one thing he could not afford to give the man at the counter right now. Across the diner, Maya was refilling coffees. She was doing well, better than well. She was doing what most people couldn't do under this kind of pressure, which was nothing visible. Nothing that broke the surface of the ordinary morning. She was performing for the man who was watching her. Rex had known people who crumbled in moments like this. Had known trained people, men with years of experience, who couldn't hold their face together when the stakes climbed high enough. This woman had been holding hers together for what the napkin suggested was a very long time. At the counter, the man, Derek, Rex had already decided that was his name, the kind of man who had a name like Derek, shifted on his stool. Rex watched him in his peripheral vision, the way you watch something you're not watching. Derek's eyes went to Maya, then to his phone, then to Maya again. The monitoring was constant, low-level, habitual. The behavior of someone who had been doing it so long, it had stopped feeling like behavior and started feeling like breathing. Rex had seen that too before. He knew exactly what kind of man he was dealing with. The kind that didn't need to do anything to be dangerous. The kind that had built an entire architecture of control, so thorough, so complete, that the walls were invisible from the outside. The kind of man that courts called low risk and victims called the most terrifying thing they had ever lived with. At 11:47, Danny stood up. "Men's room," he said to nobody in particular. He walked to the back of the diner, past table 3, past the reach-in cooler, past the door marked employees only, and on his way he passed the window that looked out onto the side lot. He was gone for 4 minutes. When he came back, he sat down and picked up his coffee and said, to the table in general, "Biscuits are good," which meant, "I've got eyes on the lot. Blue pickup, driver's side window cracked. Engine's been off long enough that whoever drove it has been inside a while." Rex nodded slightly. Carver reached for the syrup, which meant, understood. At 11:52, Rex's phone buzzed once against his thigh. He didn't take it out, didn't need to. One buzz was the signal they had agreed on, a single vibration that meant in position. And he felt it the way you feel a change in air pressure, the way the atmosphere shifts slightly before a storm that hasn't arrived yet. They were there, not in the lot, not visible, positioned the way chess pieces are positioned, not where the action was, but where the action was going to be. He looked at Danny. Danny looked at Carver. Carver looked at his watch. They had maybe 15 minutes before the diner's lunch rush started building in earnest. More people, more noise, more complexity. The window they had was now a narrowing. Rex took out his phone one more time. Typed to Maya's number, the number she had never given him, but that Wheels, who had never once failed to find a number when Rex needed one, had sent him 6 minutes ago. "Do not change anything. Stay visible. Keep him at the counter. When we move you will know. Until then, just breathe." He watched her across the diner, watched her reach into her apron pocket, read the message without moving her face, put the phone away. She picked up the coffee pot, walked to table 6, poured coffee for a man who hadn't asked for it yet. Rex watched her hands. Steady. He turned back to his plate, finished the last of his eggs, pushed the plate to the edge of the table, the way you do when you're done, the ordinary, unremarkable signal of a man who has finished his breakfast and is in no particular hurry about what comes next. Then he looked, for the first time openly, at the man on the stool at the end of the counter. Derek was looking at his phone. Rex studied him for exactly 3 seconds, long enough to see what he needed to see, short enough that it registered as nothing, the idle glance of a stranger in a diner. He looked away, reached for his coffee. Outside, if you had been standing in the right place at the right angle, you might have noticed something. A motorcycle easing into the side street 1 block east, another rolling quietly into the lot of the hardware store across the road. A third idling under the overpass 200 meters south, engine low, patient, completely still, not moving, not yet. Waiting the way trained things wait. Without restlessness, without impatience, with a particular quality of stillness that only comes from knowing exactly what comes next, and being completely ready for it. Inside the diner, Sandra refilled the coffee at table 1. Hector called an order up from the kitchen. The bell above the door rang as a family of 4 came in out of the midday heat. Everything looked exactly like it always looked. That was the point. At 11:58, Rex Calloway set his coffee cup down, reached into his vest pocket, and left 3 folded bills on the table without counting them. He stood up, rolled his shoulders once, slowly, the way you do after sitting too long, and walked toward the door. Outside, the parking lot sat quiet in the midday sun. Everything still. Everything waiting. Derek noticed the biker leave, not because it meant anything to him, not yet. Just the automatic, reflexive tracking of movement that had become, over years, as involuntary as breathing. Something moves. He clocks it, files it, moves on. The big man in the leather vest walked out the front door. The bell rang once. Derek looked back at his phone. Maya was at the far end of the counter, writing something on her order pad. Back to him. She had been keeping her back to him more than usual this morning. He had noticed that too, filed it away, hadn't decided yet what it meant. Probably nothing. She was tired. She had said so herself. He picked up his coffee. It had gone cold. He pushed it aside and thought about asking for a fresh cup and decided against it. He didn't want to call attention to how long he had been sitting here. The waitress with the grey hair had glanced at him twice in the last hour, with the particular expression of someone calculating whether to say something. He didn't need complications today. Today he just needed Maya to finish her shift. Then they would talk. He had a lot to say. Things he had been organizing in his mind for weeks. Calm, reasonable things. The kind of things that, when he laid them out clearly, she would have to understand. About Lily. About what was best for her. About the fact that this starting over in new towns with new diners and new uniforms was not a life. Not for Maya. Not for their daughter. He was going to make her see that. He was good at making people see things. He was thinking about this. About the specific order in which he would say what he needed to say. The particular tone he would use. The way he would let her talk first, so she felt heard before he redirected her. When he became aware, in the ambient, skin-level way, he became aware of most things, that something had changed. He couldn't have said what. The diner looked the same noise, same movement, same Tuesday lunch crowd building slowly toward its unremarkable peak. But something had changed. He looked up. The corner booth where the bikers had been sitting was empty. Plates still there, cups still there. But the men were gone. All of them. He hadn't heard them leave. Hadn't heard the bell. But the bell was loud in a full diner, easy to miss under conversation and the clatter of the kitchen. Could have been while he was looking at his phone. Could have been any time in the last. His eyes moved to the window. The bikes were still in the lot. All of them. He counted. 8 bikes. Same 8 bikes that had been there since 11:30. None of them had moved, but the men who rode them were not in the diner. Derek set his phone down on the counter. Slowly, he looked at the window again. Really looked, not the idle peripheral sweep he had been doing all morning, but actual focused attention. And in the reflection of the glass, distorted and incomplete, he caught something. A shape at the edge of the lot. Still, he turned his head slightly. Casually, the way you turn your head when you're just glancing around. There was a man standing at the corner of the building. Leather vest. Hands loose at his sides. Not doing anything. Just standing there the way a person stands when they are exactly where they intend to be. Derek's jaw tightened. He looked toward the hallway at the back of the diner. Another one. Sitting on the bench outside the restrooms. The bench that was never occupied, that existed purely as somewhere to put a coat. Sitting there with his forearms on his knees, looking at nothing, completely still. Derek's eyes went back to Maya. She was at table 3 now, clearing plates, her back still to him. Something cold moved through his chest. He stood up, not fast. He never did anything fast when he wasn't sure of the room. He stood up the way he always stood up, deliberately, unhurried, and buttoned his cuff and reached for his phone, and walked toward Maya. She heard him coming. She always heard him coming. Not with her ears, not exactly, but with that other sense that 2 years of living like this had sharpened to something very close to a physical ability. The awareness of him moving in her direction registered in her body before her brain processed it. A cold wave that moved from the base of her spine upward. She kept clearing the table. He stopped 2 feet behind her. "We should go," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled. The voice he used when he had decided something and was giving her the courtesy of making it sound like a suggestion. She set a plate on the tray, reached for another. "My shift doesn't end till 2, she said. "I'll wait outside." A pause. "You can tell them something came up." She picked up the tray, turned to face him. He was closer than 2 feet. He had moved while she was turned away. Closed the distance in that particular way he had. That way of taking space without appearing to take it, so that by the time you noticed he was too close, the moment to step back had already passed. She looked at his face, the careful calm of it, the patience. She had learned to read beneath that patience, had learned that it was not actually patience at all, but something that looked like patience the way a held breath looks like stillness. "Derek," she said, keeping her voice in that narrow band, not too soft, not too firm, the frequency that gave him nothing to grab onto. "I need to finish my shift." Maya, just her name, the way he said it, not loud, not threatening, just her name in that particular tone, contained more than most people's sentences. "We need to talk," he said. "You know we need to talk." He reached out. His hand moved toward her arm, the same gesture, the same motion she had felt 1,000 times, and she watched it coming the way you watch something inevitable, the way you watch the last second before impact when there is nothing left to do but absorb it. Hey! One word. Not loud, not aggressive, just present. Derek's hand stopped. They both turned. Rex Calloway was standing at the end of the counter. He hadn't come through the front door. Maya hadn't heard the bell, hadn't seen him come in. He was simply there, the way certain things are simply there when you look up, as though they had always been there, and you had only just noticed. He was looking at Derek, not at Maya, not at the room, at Derek, with a particular quality of attention that didn't need to raise its voice because it had already filled the available space. "Thought I left my map," Rex said. He walked to the booth, unhurried, completely unremarkable, reached under the table, picked up the folded map that had been sitting there since breakfast, turned back toward the door, and stopped, as if something had just occurred to him. He looked at Derek again, then at Maya, then back at Derek, and this time the look was different. Not confrontational, not threatening, just clear. The clarity of a man who has assessed a situation completely and arrived at a conclusion he intends to act on. "You doing okay?" he said. He was talking to Maya, but he was looking at Derek. Derek straightened, drew himself up the way men do when they feel a room shifting beneath them and are not yet ready to acknowledge it. "We're fine," Derek said. "This is private." Rex nodded slowly. "Sure," he said. He didn't move. And in the silence that followed, in the 3 seconds of perfect stillness that stretched between those men like something pulled taut, Maya heard it. Outside, engines. Not one, not two. The sound built from the edges of the parking lot inward, low and layered and synchronized, the kind of sound that you felt in your chest before your ears fully understood it. A vibration that moved through the floor of the diner and up through the soles of your feet and into your bones. Derek heard it too. She saw it, the exact moment he heard it, the exact moment the sound registered, and he turned his head toward the window and saw what was in the parking lot. The bikes were still there, but now there were more of them, many more. They had come in from 3 directions, east, west, and the side road that ran behind the diner, rolling in slow and deliberate and completely terrifyingly quiet, except for the engines, which were not quiet at all, which were in fact the loudest thing Maya had heard in 2 years. She counted without meaning to. 14, 16, more still coming. They filled the lot the way water fills a space, finding every available position, occupying every angle, until the blue pickup truck that Derek had driven here was surrounded on 3 sides, with nowhere to go that didn't require going through one of them. Nobody got off their bikes. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody did anything at all except sit there, engines idling, hands on handlebars, faces forward, in the particular stillness of people who have made a decision and are waiting for the other party to make theirs. Derek turned back from the window. His face had changed. Not dramatically. Not the collapse she might have imagined in the dark at 2 in the morning when she ran these scenarios. Something smaller and in some ways more complete than that. The specific alteration that happens to a face when the architecture behind it begins to fail. When the careful construction of certainty and control that a person has built and maintained and relied on meets something it was not built to withstand. He looked at Rex. Rex looked back at him. The diner had gone quiet. Not silent. The kitchen was still running. the radio still playing something low through the wall, but the particular human noise of it had dropped, the way noise drops when a room becomes aware, collectively and without discussion, that something is happening that it should not interrupt. Sandra had stopped rolling silverware. Hector had come to the kitchen window. "I don't know what she told you," Derek said. His voice was still controlled. He was fighting for it. Maya could hear the effort in it. The way a structure sounds different when it's bearing weight it wasn't designed for. Rex said nothing. "This is between us," Derek said. "You have no business here." Rex tilted his head slightly. "She asked for help," he said. 3 words. Not an accusation, not a threat. Just a statement of fact delivered in the tone of a man who dealt in facts and found most arguments against them uninteresting. Derek's jaw worked. He looked at Maya, and she looked back at him. For the first time, standing behind the counter of a diner in Tennessee, with 17 motorcycles in the parking lot, and a road captain between her and the man who had controlled every hour of her life for 2 years, she looked back at him without managing her expression, without calculating the frequency. Without giving him nothing, she just looked at him. And whatever he found in her face in that moment, whatever he had been looking for across 2 years and 1,000 mornings and every table she had ever wiped with her back to him, was not there. Not anymore. The bell above the door rang. 2 officers from the Millbrook County Sheriff's Department walked in. They didn't rush, didn't have to. Derek looked at the officers, at Rex, at the window full of motorcycles, at Maya. He looked like a man watching exits close one by one, not all at once, not dramatically, but in sequence, each one sealing shut with the quiet finality of a door you realize too late you should have gone through earlier. He sat back down on the stool, slowly, like the decision had been made somewhere below conscious thought, and his body was simply following the instruction. One of the officers walked to the counter. Maya watched Derek's hands, the hands she had tracked and calculated and braced against for 2 years. As the officer spoke to him in a low, professional voice, and Derek listened and nodded and said something she couldn't hear. She watched those hands the whole time. They were shaking. For the first time in 2 years, they were the ones shaking. She set her tray down on the counter, pressed both palms flat against the laminate surface, breathed. Outside the engines idled on, steady, patient, unhurried, the sound of something that had come a long way and was in absolutely no rush to leave. The sign above the door said Table 4. Hand-painted, black letters on creamwood. Simple enough that you might not think about it, and then you would, a beat later. The way certain simple things have a way of landing after the fact, rather than on impact. Maya had painted it herself. She wasn't a particularly good painter. The letters were slightly uneven. The 4 a little larger than the rest. The whole thing not quite centered on the board. She had considered repainting it 3 times and decided against it each time for the same reason. It looked like something made by a person. That was the point. The cafe was small. 6 tables, a long counter, a chalkboard menu that she rewrote every morning in handwriting that had steadied considerably over the past year. She had opened it 8 months ago in our town. She had chosen not because she was running to it, but because she had driven through it once on a Sunday afternoon and thought, without planning to think it, without it being a decision at all, I could stay here. It was the first time in 3 years that thought had come without fear attached to it. She stayed. The morning regulars knew her by name now. The couple from the hardware store next door, who came in every day at 7:45 for coffee and argued cheerfully about everything. The retired school teacher who always took the window table and always ordered the same thing and always tipped exactly 20% to the cent. Normal, routine, unremarkable, but different now. Different in the way that the same words can mean opposite things, depending on everything that surrounds them. Normal, because she had chosen it. Routine, because she had built it. Unremarkable, because her days no longer needed to be remarkable. No longer needed to be survived, calculated, endured. They just needed to be lived. On the wall behind the counter, between the chalkboard menu and the shelf where she kept the good coffee, there was a frame, simple wood. Nothing special. Inside it, a napkin. Folded once, slightly crumpled at the edges, the ink slightly faded from the months it had spent in a vest pocket before she had asked for it back, and Rex had produced it without comment, as though he had been keeping it for exactly this purpose. The handwriting was barely legible, jagged, uneven, the letters of a hand that had been shaking too hard to write properly. Table 4. He has a gun. I can't call 911. Please help me. And below that, in letters pressed so hard the pen had nearly gone through the paper, please, underlined twice. Customers asked about it sometimes. She told them. Not all of it. Not the years before. Not the cracked ribs. Not the 5 apartments in 3 states, or the morning she had stood in parking lots counting cars before she felt safe enough to get out. But the diner, the napkin, the sound of 17 motorcycles filling a parking lot in Tennessee. She told it the way she had learned to tell hard things, plainly, without drama, the way you talk about something that happened to you, rather than something that is still happening to you. That distinction had taken a long time to arrive at. She was grateful for it every day. Some mornings, before she unlocked the front door and turned the sign and started the coffee, she would stand at the counter and look at the frame for a moment. Not with sadness. Not anymore. With something closer to the feeling you get when you look at a scar that has fully healed. The particular mix of memory and distance, the acknowledgement of what it cost and what it proved. She had been that woman. Shaking hands, borrowed pen, 11 seconds of a stranger looking at his phone. She was also this woman. 6 tables, morning regulars, handwriting that didn't shake anymore. Both things were true at once. She had learned to let them be. At 9:43 on a Thursday morning in October, 11 months and 12 days after a Tuesday, she would never forget, the bell above the door of table 4 rang. Maya looked up from the counter. Rex Calloway walked in. He looked the same silver at his temples, the same worn vest, the same unhurried quality of movement that she had first noticed through a diner window and then learned, over the months since, to recognize as something specific. Not slowness, not ease exactly, but the particular bearing of a man who had decided a long time ago that most things worth doing were worth doing without rushing. He looked around the cafe slowly, took in the chalkboard menu, the 6 tables, the regulars, the hand-painted sign above the door. His eyes moved to the frame behind the counter. He stood there for a moment, looking at it. Then he sat down at the counter, not the stool by the window, but the middle one, the one directly across from where she was standing, and set his hands flat on the laminate surface. Coffee? Maya said. Please, he said. She poured it the way she poured all coffee. Without fuss, without ceremony, the ordinary generous pour of someone who had made this motion 10,000 times and found it, still quietly satisfying. She set the cup in front of him. He wrapped both hands around it. She thought about the first time she had watched him do that. In a different diner, at the far end of a counter, a man she hadn't known yet, whose name she didn't have yet, around whose coffee cup she had slid a folded piece of paper with shaking hands, and then walked away from without looking back. She thought about what it had cost her to do that, and what it had given her. Rex drank his coffee. For a while neither of them spoke, the way people don't speak when the silence between them is comfortable enough that words would only interrupt it. The morning regulars came and went. The couple from the hardware store arrived and began their daily argument about whether it was going to rain. The schoolteacher took the window table and ordered the same thing she always ordered. Normal. Rex finished his coffee, set the cup down, looked at the frame on the wall for a long moment, at the napkin, at the jagged handwriting, at the arrow, and the two underlines, and the word pressed so hard into the paper that you could feel the desperation of it even through the glass. When he finally spoke, he didn't look away from it. "You know what I remember most?" he said. His voice was the same as it always was, quiet, unhurried. The voice of a man who chose his words the way you choose tools, for what they could do, not for how they sounded. Maya waited. "Not the napkin," he said. "Not the parking lot. Not any of it." He paused. "I remember the arrow." She looked at the frame, at the small hand-drawn arrow below the words, pointing left, toward where Derek had been sitting. "You were shaking so hard I could see it in the handwriting," Rex said. "And you still drew that arrow straight." He finally looked at her. "People only draw straight when they've already decided," he said. "Fear makes everything crooked. You were afraid. I could see that from across the room. But that line was straight." He let that sit for a moment. "That's not something I did," he said. "That was already in you." Maya looked at the napkin, at the arrow she had drawn without thinking about it. The last thing she had added before folding the paper, the practical afterthought of a woman who needed to make sure a stranger understood exactly who she was talking about. Straight. She hadn't known that until now. Rex put a folded bill on the counter, stood up, rolled his shoulders once, slowly, the way he always did, and reached for his jacket. "Good coffee," he said. "Thank you," she said. He nodded, walked to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. Not turning back, just pausing, the way you pause when there's one more thing and you're deciding whether to say it. He didn't say anything else. He walked out. The bell rang once, bright, ordinary, the same sound as 1,000 other mornings. And through the window, Maya watched him swing onto his bike, pull on his jacket, start the engine. The sound of it filled the street for a moment, then faded, then was gone. She stood at the counter for a moment after he left. Then she picked up his cup, washed it the way she washed everything, carefully, without rush, put it back on the shelf, and went back to work. Outside, the October morning was cold and clear and completely unremarkable. Leaves on the sidewalk, a dog tied outside the hardware store, a school bus moving slowly through the intersection at the end of the block. Ordinary things. Beautiful, ordinary things. The kind you only really see when you've spent long enough not being able to. This is Heart Tales. We'll see you in the next one.